There we go. That's a little bit better. Hopefully you can see my face now and it's not crazy grainy. In case you guys are wondering, iPhones actually don't have the best cameras. Go with Google, but that's beside the point. The title of this video, as you will have seen, is 10 Things I Learned from Reading the Book Unbroken. Now, this is something that I heard about a long time ago from somebody that I can't remember, but it is writing down things that you learn from books you read. And Unbroken was the first book that I read all the way through, cover to cover, since, well, yeah, after I got back from Korea. So it was a really good book. The reason I read it is because I actually watched it with my ex-girlfriend at one point, and I was like, that was a really good movie, but I know there's a book about it, and my sister had told me that it was good. So I read it, and I ended up reading it in like a week. I couldn't put it down. Fantastic book. Learned a ton from it. I highly recommend you guys check it out. I'll throw the Amazon link to the book down in the description if you want to check it out. But here's 10 things. And as I go through these 10 things, I'm going to explain a little bit why I thought that and how I learned it. And forgive me if I don't recollect perfectly, since it's been almost a year since I read the book. But number one is energy must be focused and channeled to be useful. Now, this one was fun, seeing as though our boy, Louis Zambrini, who was the main character of the book and probably one of the coolest humans to ever lived, when he was younger, was really not a good kid. Like, he was a thief. He had lots of problems. I believe he took up smoking at like the age of 6. Like, the kid was a bit of a rapscallion, if you will. But then he discovered running through the help of his brother, and he was really, really good. So a lot of the times, what I've seen in my life is I have energy, but unless I take the time and have the discipline to focus that energy into doing something worthwhile, it actually becomes really self-destructive a lot of the time. I end up using that energy for not the best ways, and it doesn't get me anywhere. Number 2, those that believe in you are vastly more important than those who don't. Again, when Lewis was growing up, he was not a good kid. Most people did not like him. And everybody thought that he was never going to amount to anything. Basically everybody in the hometown where they lived. But, including his father, I should add. His father was not very happy with Lewis most of the time. And it was the 1920s, 1930s, so he beat him a lot. And the only person that really believed in him was his brother. And his brother took super good care of him. And like I said, he was the reason that he got him into running. And in the end, I think that's a super powerful concept. He had the whole town vying against him, saying that he wasn't worth anything and he wasn't good enough. And then all he needed was his brother saying, hey, you got this. You can do it. And he ended up breaking a bunch of records in running. I'm not going to tell you about them because I think you should read the book to find out for yourself. Number 3, being outside equals being healthy. Now, this is one that I haven't chirped up about a lot on the YouTube channel, but if you know me personally, you know that I'm big into natural health and just the fact that being outside and living in nature is really the best way to be. I say as I've spent basically all day inside, but hey, I did go for a jog earlier, so that counts, I think. But no, as far as this applied to Louis, as he was growing up, obviously people lived outside a lot more back in the day than we do right now. No generation has ever spent less time outside than we do. Seems that we live 90% of our lives inside, which is kind of sketchy when you think about it. But anyways, as Lewis grew up and he was starting to become more of an athlete, he ended up spending a lot of time on one of the Indian reservations down in California where he was from. And while he was doing that, he lived what I would call a very MoveNat lifestyle, or natural movement. That's actually the fitness modality that I am certified through, so I might throw the link to them down in the description too. Why not? And he ran, hunted, and read books. That's all he did for a summer, was he would run the trails back behind the village, and he would read in the evenings, and he spent a lot of time hunting. And for me, that sounds like a pretty idyllic lifestyle. It does not sound that bad, I must admit. If I could make a good living doing that, I would be very impressed. There's lots of different science that backs up the health benefits of being outside, getting sun, all that good stuff. But it certainly helped him. As a matter of fact, he did have a lot of people say that kind of that summer and his eventual training to become an Olympian was one of the reasons he was able to survive the hardships that he ended up going through. All right. Number 4, one of my favorite quotes. They kind of talk about this in the movie, but it's more important to the book. A moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. Oh, man, I could go on about this one for forever. But this one was also a quote from his brother that he gave to him when he was talking about his racing, because Lewis was a miler. He entered into the mile dash, and he was the fastest high schooler in history up to that point to run the mile. He was stupid quick. Homie could just cook. And he remembered that basically he was going into one of the more important matches, and he didn't want to lose. And he's like, I don't know if I've got it in me. And his brother just said, a moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. Like, if you push through when it counts, if you do what's right when it counts, you get the results. And oftentimes the results are so much more worth the pain many times over. So I loved that. That was a fantastic quote. I kind of want that on my wall. Number 5, fast forward. He joins the Army Air Corps. He doesn't want to be in the Army Air Corps, but he ends up, I think through a mistake, signing up in the Army Air Corps, becomes a navigator on a B-24 bomber crew, and ends up crashing into the Pacific. And he's on a raft for a very, very long time. I can't remember the exact amount of days. I do remember that he beat the record for surviving a shipwreck and surviving on a raft in the middle of the ocean. During that time, sharks were always around his raft. He crashes with 3 other guys, one of whom starves to death. The other one, his pilot, who is also one of his very good friends, survives with him. And so number 5, stay the heck away from sharks, man. You don't want anything to do with them. They're terrifying. Some of the stories he tells about sharks are just absolutely that one's just for fun. Number 6, you don't need to overthink your situation. Throughout the book, Louis is a fantastic example of take it as he comes and just roll with it. He doesn't overthink and over agonize about everything that happens to him. That's true when the Tokyo Olympics get canceled. He runs in the 1938 Berlin Olympics and has some pretty cool adventure stories about that. But his real training test, I believe he was still in high school or had just barely graduated high school when he ran in the Olympics. In the Olympics, this guy was crazy good at running. But then he's been training for 4 years getting ready for the Tokyo Olympics, and it's canceled due to the war. And then next thing you know, his athletic career looks like it's gone because, number 1, the whole world is exploding, and he gets drafted into the military. Like I said, he also didn't want to be in the Air Corps because flying scared him. And so he's right where he doesn't want to be. His dreams looks like they've crashed and shattered, but he doesn't agonize. He just rolls with it and keeps going. And then that ability becomes 10 times more important as things start to spiral more and more out of hand. When his plane crashes and he spends a freaking crap ton of time starving to death on a boat, watching one of his good, him and the pilot of the plane were the only ones that actually survived the crash. Were the only ones that eventually survived. 3 of them survived the crash. Like I said, one of them starved to death, and then him and his buddy had no chance of survival. They were out on the freaking water for forever. But Louis just thinks about, if we're going to survive, how are we going to do it? He comes up with a plan, and he follows it. He doesn't over agonize about what happens, and that ability to just take it one step at a time, move forward with whatever life gives you. The man made so much lemonades. So much lemonade. Did I just put an ED on that? So much lemonades. Man, yeah, I speak English. Anyways, he made lemonade out of the lemons that life gave him. That's what I'm saying. And I think that's something I definitely need to work on. as today is a very good example of. I've had a great day. I've already clocked lots of time this week, but I'm sitting around today saying, oh my gosh, I'm not accomplishing any of my goals. I need to do something. So I'm filming this video to fix that problem. But you don't need to overthink your situation. Your situation is your situation, and we already kind of know what we need to do. So all we need to do is do it. Number 7, here's when we get into kind of the craziness, even though it's already been crazy. This is where the amazing stuff starts to come out. The only thing that can break you is you. So Louis' plane crashes. He spends a crap ton of time out in the ocean, and then he is captured by Japanese forces and taken to a prison camp where he is interrogated for several months. He was already absolutely skeletal, starved to the bone before he was captured. And although he spent 2 or 3 days, he spent around 2 weeks, I believe, getting very good hospital care where he was fed well and that sort of thing. Then he's shipped off to the interrogation camp where he is put under very strenuous interrogation under the worst conditions for a very long time. I believe he spends over 2 months being interrogated. And after that, he goes on to his time in Japan. And he's put into 2 separate prison camps. And both of those prison camps are commanded by this guy who's called the Bird. And I wish I could remember his full name in Japanese, but I'm not going to attempt it because I'd butcher the pronunciation. And this guy was one of the most famous war criminals of World War II, which is saying something for literally the biggest conflict that's ever been fought on this planet. And he is a prisoner of war till the end of the war, till VJ Day, so 1945. He was a prisoner of war for over 2.5 years. And he survived. The survival rating in those camps, if I remember correctly, was around 20%. So 80% of the men that got sent to those died. And he survived because he was unbroken. He would not break. He kept going no matter what. As a matter of fact, his abilities as a thief that he had developed when he was at the age of freaking 6, stealing booze and pies and cigarettes off of doorsteps and out of people's houses in Southern California, actually paid off quite big dividends in the end when he was being held by the Japanese. But the whole point of the story is held together in that one statement. The only thing that can break you is you. Number 8. Humans are both good and bad. They decide what they become. Now, I'll let the book describe most of this, but he talks very, very well in the book about both the inhumanity and humanity exhibited in those camps that he was held in. Both those who became completely hardened and just absolutely inhumane, the treatment that was given to some of the men by the guards and that sort of thing. He does go into fairly good detail on some of the horrors that he saw and witnessed, but he also talks quite a bit about the humanity that he witnessed, not just amongst the prisoners, mind you, and some of the instances of that are absolutely incredible. People willing to risk their lives to save their friends, like men who are given a ball of rice that's roughly this, the size of like one of those big jawbreaker candies, or, a very large gumball. And that is like their daily allotment of rice. That's what they're living off of. And men who are willing to break off a portion of that and give, each man willing to give some of that to a sick comrade and friend, or are willing to risk their neck to sneak into the cook's shack and steal some chicken broth for one of their friends who's sick. But also instances of humanity amongst the guards when they were supposed to be beating prisoners, would tell them to shout and act like they were getting hit, and then they would thump their clubs against the ground, so it sounded like they were beating them, but they weren't actually. And he goes into very, very strict detail and makes a very good point that the seeds of good and bad are in everybody, and it's through our actions and our decisions that we become good or bad. Number 9, it's not the injury that kills you, it's the shock. Now this one was fun because he does get rescued at the end of the war. He gets liberated in his camp, and then he goes home and he is a wreck. Out of the 20% that survived those camps and actually got back to the United States, over 70% of them died within 10 years after the war, because of PTSD, alcohol abuse, suicide, that kind of thing. It was rough for those guys. And Louis Zambrini had it just as bad. He got married, had a daughter. Things were going good, but they weren't going good because he was a raging alcoholic and was seeing the bird, that commanding officer, in his dreams. And yeah, things went downhill fast for our boy. Went downhill so fast that his wife was ready to divorce him, as she had the complete right to, seeing as though on multiple occasions he woke up straddling his pregnant wife with their second child, with his hands around her throat, choking her, because he thought he was choking out the bird in his dreams. So the shock doesn't kill you. The injury doesn't kill you. He didn't break. He did very good when he was over in it, but then he came back and he couldn't actually come back because he was still left over there. The shock and the trauma that he experienced over there were killing him. And this brings us to, last but not least, number 10. And that is gratitude is the cure. Now, it's kind of an interesting one for number 10, but it does wrap up the book. There's lots that I could say about the way it ends, but suffice it to say that our boy Louis ended up living a very, very long, very, very successful, and very, very happy life because he was able to find forgiveness. If you want to know exactly how he did that and the story behind it, I suggest you read the book. It's definitely worth your time. But the end point that I'll make in this video is that if you want to move on, if you want to improve, if you want to get better, you need to find something to be grateful for and be able to find gratitude about the situation you're actually in, or something to find gratitude about in the trauma that you experienced even. It sounds crazy, sounds very, very counterproductive, paradoxical, I don't know. But it's true. If you can find like something that you're grateful for, some way that you learned, some way that you overcame, some way that you developed as a result of something bad that happened to you, you've literally taken that bad thing and turned it into something good. So I'll leave you with that thought. This has been a long video. I hope you've enjoyed. Like I said, I'll leave the link to down in the description. I'm going to leave this one raw. Probably not going to edit it that much, but hope you guys have enjoyed. Consider subscribing. Peace.